May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord. Our gospel this morning was a story that was long and beautiful. It talked about a man who had a demon, or perhaps I should say more properly, demons. Demons are something that we don't really understand. We don't understand what the Bible is talking about when it uses the word demons. We certainly know that there are people who are not right in their mind. They're confused, sometimes very much so. Sometimes they'll need to go to see a psychiatrist. They'll be put on medication. Occasionally they'll go to the hospital for a while. And beyond that, they might even have to be institutionalized because their mental illness is severe. We don't say that they have demons. We say that they're schizophrenic or paranoid or some other term that the doctors might use. Nevertheless, we don't see this as a demon that's possessing someone. We look at it as a sickness. But we do talk about demons in another way. Sometimes you'll hear someone say, well, he's got his demons to deal with. And it could be that the person might be under the influence of alcohol. They might be a drug addict. Or it could be something else that's bothered them for a long time, that's grabbed them. And that seems to take over at times, and they can't control it. And sometimes those demons are very mild. Nevertheless, they're there. I remember, when I was younger, my mother always said that I had been a sickly child. And she said that because up until 5 years old, she called it a nervous stomach. I found it difficult to hold food down, she said. And so whenever she made a meal for me, she would make two, because the first one I ate, I would whoops. And then the second one I could hold down. I don't know how much truth to put into that. It was long ago, I don't remember any of that. I can't believe it happened at every meal, at every day. It probably happened enough, though, that it bothered her. But she said it many times, not just to me, but to friends and others, and I overheard this. Yeah, Robert was a sickly child. And I tell you this story because that's what stuck with me, that I had been sickly. And it carried with me a long time. I remember sitting in a music class. The teacher was probably playing a classical piece, and I was in the back of the room, and I remember saying to myself, you know, you're not going to live very long. And so that whole demon stuck with me for a very long time. I always felt I was not as strong as other guys. And this continued, and even today it resonates in my head at times, although I know it's not true. And certainly, unless I plan to live to be like 350, I can't say that I'm going to die early, because I've lived a long time already. Nevertheless, that demon is still there. The demon, however, that Luke is talking about is something else than that. Here's a man who has been uncontrollable. He's been a danger to himself. He's been a danger to the community. And the only thing they could do is to put him in shackles and chains. And even then, somehow he got this superhuman strength. And Luke tells us he was able to break those chains. And he finally ends up living in the tombs. It's most appropriate because he's not really alive. He can't be with the community. He's a man who, yes, he breathes, but he's really dead. And he's living with the dead. It's very sad. Well, Jesus and his disciples had gotten into a boat, and they had left Galilee, and they were going to go to the other side of the lake. Sometimes it's called the sea. Jesus was tired, and so he lay down in the stern and fell asleep. But then, as often happens on this Lake of Galilee, a storm quickly came upon them. The wind blew. The waves began to get high. And the disciples began to be fearful because water was pouring into the boat. And they could only take out a little bit at a time. And they feared that they were going to sink and drown. And so finally they wake up Jesus and they say, "Don't you care what's happening to us? We're going to die." And he looks at them. He stands up and assesses the situation, and he says, "Peace, be still, be quiet." And the wind stops blowing, and the waves calm down. And Jesus turns to them and he says, "Why don't you have any faith?" And the disciples looked at one another and they said, "Who is this man who has control even over the wind and the waves?" Well, it's interesting because they then cross the Sea of Galilee and they come to the country of the Gerasenes on the other side of the lake. This is a Gentile country, a non-Jewish country. And upon getting out of the boat, the first thing that happens is that this man with the demons approaches him. There's an interaction. Jesus calls upon these demons to come out of him. And the first thing they say, "We know who you are. You're the Son of the Most High God." It's interesting, is it not, that the disciples didn't recognize who Jesus was, and neither did anyone else, but the demons. The demons know who Jesus is, the Son of the Most High God. Jesus asks them, "What is your name?" And they said Legion, because there were so many of them. But they were afraid. They said, "Don't send us back into the abyss." You see, the demons had a certain amount of power, and they could take over a person, so that the person lost control. But now they see in Jesus that he has power greater than they have. He is able to destroy them. They're fearful. "Don't send us back into the abyss." And there was a herd of swine, and they said, "Send us into the pigs." Jews have nothing to do with pigs. It was considered to be an unclean animal. They didn't raise them. They didn't eat pork. The Gentiles did. So it seemed appropriate to send these demons into the pigs. They entered the pigs, and the pigs then took off and ran into the water and drowned. The people who kept the pigs went into the cities and the country and told people what was going on, and they all came out and they saw the man whom they recognized, but he was now fully clothed, and he was sitting talking with Jesus like any other normal human being. And they too became afraid. Here was a man who had a power that they did not have, and they didn't want to become involved with him. "Please leave us." They wanted their own power, you see. They wanted to make sure that they were in control of their lives. And so Jesus and his disciples get into the boat. The man who formerly had the demons wanted to join them, but he said, "No, you go back and tell people what God has done for you." And he went out back into the city and began to say what Jesus had done for him. The presence, you see, of the living Christ changes everything. The story is not so much about the man who had the demons. He's just a vehicle. The story is about Jesus and what he can do to a person's life and how he can help. Because when Jesus is present, when the living God is present in our lives, you see, things can change. We might not like the change. We might think that, well, I really want to go there, and God doesn't want me to go there. He'll show us another way. But we have to let him have the power. The disciples and Jesus get back to Galilee, and they are immediately surrounded by Jairus and a group of people. Jairus was the head of a synagogue, and he said to Jesus, "My daughter is very, very ill. Come and heal her." And Jesus says, "Lead on." But on the way to the man's house, there's a disruption, because a woman who had been hemorrhaging for 12 years had said to herself, "If I can but touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed." And so she gets close enough to Jesus to touch his clothes. And Jesus felt the power going out of him, and he stopped and he said, "Who touched me?" And when she admitted it, he said, "Go, your faith has made you whole." And then friends of Jairus come and they say, "Don't bother the teacher anymore, because your little daughter has died." And Jesus says to him, "Do not be afraid, only have faith. Take me to your house." And so they went to Jairus' house. Jesus kicks everybody out except for a couple disciples and the parents. and he reaches his hand, he says, "Little girl, get up." In the presence of Jesus, there is always hope. When God is part of our lives, there is always a possibility of change for the good. You all know of the AA program, Alcoholics Anonymous. If you haven't been in it, though, you might not understand some of the elements of it. They have what they call a 12-step program. And the first step is to say that we admit we are powerless over our addiction and that our lives have become unmanageable. Then the second step is we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. They couldn't do it themselves. They can't do it themselves. They have to look beyond them. And then the third step is we have made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. And they added, as we understand him. When the Soviet Union was still in place, they had a great alcoholic disease problem in the Soviet Union. They probably still do. And they'd heard of the AA program, and they contacted people in the United States. Could you bring this program over to us? And AA said, sure. But when the Russians read it, they saw these first 3 steps, and they said, you know, we're happy with the program, but we want to eliminate these first 3 steps. They were atheists, you see. They didn't believe in God. But the people from AA said, no, this is absolutely critical. We cannot go on with our program unless the people turn to God. And so that's the message today. We turn to Jesus, who enters our lives, and he's there, and we shouldn't be afraid that he's going to usurp our power. It doesn't belong to us anyway. We need to place ourselves in his care and to let him lead. And he will always lead us in the way we ought go. Amen. The peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Our next hymn is hymn number 658. 658.